The day Asha was born, the world outside the hospital window was loud with rain. Rain so heavy it drowned the sound of her first cry. Rain so fierce it rattled the thin glass, as if the sky itself had something to say about her arrival. Her mother, Mina, held her tightly in trembling arms. Not from fear. Mina had known fear long before this day, but from exhaustion so profound she felt hollow. She hadn't slept properly in months, working double shifts, taking buses in the freezing dark, counting every coin twice. Yet when she looked at Asha, none of that mattered. "There you are," she whispered, brushing a fingertip across her newborn daughter's cheek. "My whole world." The nurse smiled kindly, but with a tiredness that matched Mina's own.
"She's healthy."
"Strong grip, too." Mina laughed softly, though her eyes glistened. "Good. She'll need it." Because outside that room, life was waiting, impatient and unkind. When they returned home 2 days later, the apartment greeted them with its usual shiver. The railway line ran just behind the building, and every 15 minutes the walls trembled as freight trains roared past. Neighbors complained. Visitors stared. But this was the only home Mina could afford. Asha didn't seem bothered. As a baby, she slept through the noise. As a toddler, she danced when the walls vibrated. As a child, she learned to time her thoughts around the passing engines. Life shakes, she figured, but you don't have to fall. By age 6, she was already independent in small ways most children never needed to be. She tied her own shoes, folded her shirts, helped her mother sweep the kitchen floor. And whenever Mina looked overwhelmed, Asha would press small palms to her mother's cheeks and whisper, "I can help." Mina never corrected her. Even little help was help, and Asha's hands were steady and warm. The lonely mornings. School mornings were the hardest. Mina left the apartment before sunrise to catch the early bus to the diner where she worked. She'd tiptoe into Asha's room every morning, kiss her forehead and whisper, "See you after school." Most days, Asha woke just in time to hear the door close. She got herself up, washed her face, tied her hair back the way her mother taught her, wrapped her scarf twice to block the winter wind, and walked herself to school. She told herself she liked the quiet. She told herself she liked the independence. But sometimes, on the coldest mornings, she wished someone would hold her hand on the walk there. The girl at the back of the class. Asha didn't speak much in class. Not because she didn't know the answers, but because she learned early that the world wasn't always gentle with the quiet ones. She had a sharp mind but a soft voice, and school liked loud better than bright. Her math teacher once said, "If you don't speak up, you'll fall behind." Her science teacher sighed every time Asha took longer to respond. Her social studies teacher told her mother during a rushed parent meeting, "She's distracted, maybe not focused on learning." Mina, exhausted from a double shift, simply nodded, unable to explain that she and Asha sometimes ate dinner at 11 p.m., or that Asha stayed awake waiting for her to come home, or that silence wasn't lack of intelligence. It was survival, but teachers don't always understand survival. They understand report cards, timelines,
Participation point.
And so Asha sat in the back of the room, quietly absorbing everything, building mental worlds inside her head that no one else could see. One day, during recess, she overheard 2 students whisper, "She's weird. She never talks. She's like broken." Asha looked down at her shoes and said nothing. But inside, something small bent under the weight. It didn't break. Not yet. But it bent. Despite everything, Asha always had dreams, small ones at first. She dreamed of a bigger apartment, a warm winter coat, a night when her mother didn't look so tired. She dreamed of a kitchen with plates that matched and a stove that didn't rattle when trains passed. Sometimes she dreamed of a birthday party, not an expensive one, but one where someone remembered her birthday without having to mark it on the calendar first. And in the quiet corners of her mind, she dreamed of buildings. Whenever she walked home, she stared at the skyline, not the shiny buildings downtown, but the old ones, cracked, forgotten, holding stories no one cared to hear. Asha would stop beside abandoned houses and let her fingers trace the peeling paint. These walls survived something, she would think. Just like me. She didn't know the word architect yet, but she knew she wanted to build things that didn't fall apart. The night everything changed. One night, when Asha was 8, she woke to the sound of coughing. Not the soft morning cough her mother sometimes had. A deep, frightening, chest-shaking cough. She ran to the kitchen and found Mina hunched over the counter, one hand gripping the edge, the other pressed to her chest. "Mom?" Asha whispered. Mina forced a smile.
I'm fine, sweetheart.
Just tired. But Asha saw the truth. Her mother's face was pale. Her hands trembled. Her breath rattled like the old window panes. Asha poured her a glass of water, cooked her instant noodles, helped her to bed. For the first time that night, Asha felt fear settle into her bones. Not fear of monsters or darkness. Fear of losing the only person she loved more than anything. She lay awake beside her mother, watching her breathe, counting each inhale like a fragile gift. Long after midnight, she whispered a promise to the quiet room. "I'll take care of you. Always." Little did she know, life would demand she keep that promise sooner than expected. The world grows heavy. By age 10, Asha understood more about hardship than many adults. She understood overdue bills, understood why the fridge was emptier some weeks, understood why her mother sighed into her hands when she thought Asha wasn't looking. And Asha did what she always did. She helped.
She cleaned.
She studied. She waited up at night to unlock the door for her mother. But the world had a way of asking more from those it thought were strong. Asha didn't break. But she started to bend again. The classroom was a square room painted in colors that once tried to be cheerful, sunny yellow, faded blue, but years of dust and scratches made everything look tired. The windows rattled when the wind was strong, and the fluorescent lights flickered just enough to make students complain. For Asha, the room felt like a box she had to grow inside, even though there was barely enough air to breathe. She always chose the seat near the window, not because she liked the view, but because the sunlight felt like a friend, quiet, warm, unbothered by who she was. The school day started the same way every morning. The bell rang, students shuffled in, voices filled the room, and Asha shrank deeper into her chair. She kept her books stacked neatly, her pencils sharpened, her eyes down. Her silence wasn't fear. It was habit. The world wasn't gentle with quiet kids. The teacher, who spoke too loudly, Mrs. Carter, her homeroom teacher, had a voice that carried through walls. She was strict, efficient, and impatient in ways that left no room for softness. "Class, open your textbooks to page 47, she announced, already turning her back to write on the board. Asha flipped to the page quietly. "Can someone explain the main idea of the passage?" Mrs. Carter asked, scanning the room. Asha knew the answer. She always did. She even felt a small urge, just for a moment, to raise her hand. But then she heard a few boys whisper, "If she talks, no one will hear her. She sounds like a mouse. She never knows anything." The familiar burn of embarrassment crept up her neck. She lowered her hand before it even rose. Mrs. Carter sighed dramatically.
No volunteers? Fine.
"Let's move on." Her gaze swept the room, pausing on Asha for a second too long. Not a look of curiosity. A look of disappointment. As if Asha were responsible for wasting her time. The lunchtime isolation. Lunch should have been a break, a time to breathe. For Asha, it was another small battlefield. She sat alone most days.
Not because she wanted to,
but because no one invited her, and she didn't know how to invite herself. She opened her lunchbox quietly. 2 slices of bread, some leftover curry in a small steel container, and an apple her mother insisted she take. Zoya used to sit with her. They used to split sandwiches, giggle about silly things, draw doodles on napkins. But high school created invisible lines, lines of status, wealth, clothing brands, and social power. Zoya crossed over. Asha remained behind. One lunch period, Zoya passed Asha's table with her new friends. Their laughter filled the cafeteria like fireworks. Asha lifted her head for a moment, catching Zoya's eye. For a heartbeat, something flickered, recognition, guilt, memory. Then Zoya looked away, kept walking, kept laughing. Asha lowered her gaze to her food. The curry tasted like nothing at all, the day she was misunderstood. One afternoon during math class, the school counselor entered the room. She wore a bright scarf and carried a clipboard, always a bad sign. "Mrs. Carter, may I borrow Asha for a moment?" she asked. Heads turned. Whispers surged. Asha felt her stomach twist. She gathered her notebook and followed the counselor out. They walked down a long hallway decorated with motivational posters that felt ironic. Believe in yourself. Your voice matters. The counselor opened the door to her office and motioned for Asha to sit. "How are you doing in school?" she asked gently. Asha nodded. "Good. Are you sure? Your teachers say you seem distracted."
Quiet.
"Maybe even overwhelmed." Asha blinked. "Quiet?
Yes. Distracted? No.
Overwhelmed? Only by everything outside of school." She hesitated. "I'm just tired sometimes." "Tired?" the counselor repeated, scribbling something. "Do you sleep well at home?" Asha paused. She thought of her mother coughing at midnight. The late bus. The dim hallway light. The fear she tried to swallow at night. She nodded slowly. "Yes." The counselor sighed. "You know, if something is wrong at home, you can tell us." Asha's throat tightened. Nothing was wrong in the way adults imagined. Her mother wasn't hurting her. Her home wasn't unsafe. Her life was just hard. But that wasn't something schools understood.
"Ay, fine," Asha whispered.
The counselor didn't believe her, but she let her go anyway. When Asha returned to class, the whispers waited. What did she do? Is she in trouble? Maybe she's failing. Asha sat down quietly. Mrs. Carter didn't look at her. The classroom walls, once yellow and blue, now felt gray. The spark SHID, but even on the hardest days, something small glowed inside her. It appeared in art class. The smell of paint. The drag of pencils across paper. The freedom of blank pages. Here, she felt weightless. She didn't need loudness to be seen. Her sketches spoke louder than words ever could. She drew houses at first, simple boxes with windows and doors. Then taller buildings. Then arches and curves she imagined while waiting for her mother at night. One afternoon, lost in a sketch, she didn't hear the train passing behind their apartment. She didn't hear her classmates chattering. She didn't even hear the teacher walking toward her. "Asha?" Her art teacher's voice was soft, curious. She jumped slightly. He smiled.
"Sorry."
"Didn't mean to scare you. This is incredible." Asha blinked, unsure. He held her sketchbook gently, flipping through page after page. "These aren't doodles," he said. "These are blueprints. Concepts. You think like a designer." Asha stared at him. No one had ever used words like designer, blueprints, or concepts for something she did. No one had ever looked at her drawings like they mattered. "Have you ever thought about architecture?" the teacher asked. She shook her head slowly. "What's that?" He smiled, understanding. "It's when you design buildings, homes, centers, anything meant to last." Last. The word hit her chest softly but deeply. Nothing in her life lasted. Not security. Not comfort. Not friendships. But buildings? Buildings could stand for 100 years. The teacher placed the sketchbook in her hands. "As long as you keep drawing," he said, "you're going somewhere. I promise you." Asha nodded, but inside, something lit up, small at first, then brighter. Maybe she wasn't invisible. Maybe she wasn't slow, or quiet, or broken. Maybe she was just unheard, unseen, unnoticed. But her hands created worlds. And one day, she would be strong enough to stand inside one. The future, she didn't know yet. As she walked home that evening, her sketchbook hugged to her chest, she felt the wind brush her cheeks softly. The trains passed as always, shaking the ground. But for the first time, the shaking didn't scare her. It inspired her, because she finally knew the truth. Her life may tremble. Her home may shake. Her world may be unstable, but she could build something stronger than all of it. And that thought, small, fragile, but powerful, followed her all the way home. The day her world collapsed. The winter that year felt colder than usual. The kind of cold that crept through window cracks, settled into blankets, and lingered inside bones. The apartment Asha and her mother lived in had thin walls and a heater that groaned more than it warmed, so they layered themselves in sweaters and old quilts and pretended it was enough. Asha grew accustomed to seeing her breath fog the air while she dressed for school. She grew accustomed to cold fingers and colder mornings. But nothing could have prepared her for the cold that would come next, the kind that didn't touch the skin, but the soul. It started on a Thursday evening, the kind that comes with dark skies and the smell of approaching snow. Asha was 11, old enough to notice trouble, young enough to hope it would pass. She sat at the small kitchen table doing homework when she heard her mother's cough from the other room. It wasn't the usual cough. Not the morning scratchiness. Not the tired exhale she disguised as clearing her throat. This cough was deeper. Pulling. Heavy. Asha set her pencil down. She waited. Another cough came, sharper this time. "Mom," she called softly. No answer. She stood and walked to the bedroom. Her mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, one hand pressed against her chest, the other gripping the blanket, as if it were holding her to the world. "Mom," Asha whispered again. Mina forced a smile. "It's just a little dizziness, sweetheart."
Ivy fine.
Asha didn't believe her. She could see the pallor beneath her mother's dark skin, the way her lips tightened with each breath, the way her shoulders sagged as if carrying something much heavier than exhaustion. "Did you eat?" Asha asked. Her mother hesitated, that tiny pause that told the truth before any words did. Asha swallowed. She had eaten the last of the rice the night before. Her mother must have skipped her own meal. Again. "Let me make something," Asha offered, although she already knew the cupboards were nearly empty. "No, no," Mina murmured, patting her hand.
Seat.
"Finish your homework." But then she coughed again, so suddenly and violently that she bent over, gripping her chest. Asha's heart dropped. That was the moment everything changed. The collapse. A few minutes later, Mina tried to stand up. She wobbled once.
Twice.
"Asha, could you?" she began softly. But the words never finished. Her eyes rolled back, her legs buckled, and she crumpled to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "Mom!" Asha's scream tore through the apartment. She ran to her mother, shaking her shoulders, calling her name again and again. Nothing. No response. Just shallow, strained breaths. Asha's hands trembled so hard, she almost dropped the phone as she dialed emergency services. The operator's calm voice made her feel even more alone. "It's okay," the voice repeated gently. "Help is coming. Stay with her." Asha stayed, holding her mother's hand, whispering apologies, prayers, promises, anything she could think of. Sirens eventually filled the street. Paramedics rushed in, asking rapid questions Asha barely understood. They lifted her mother onto a stretcher. The blanket slid, revealing how thin Mina had become. Asha followed them down the stairs, her small legs struggling to keep up. The night felt too quiet, too dark, too big for an 11-year-old girl. The hospital lights. Emergency rooms have their own kind of cold, white, bright, sterile, unfriendly. Asha sat in a plastic chair, hugging her backpack like it might protect her. Doctors moved around her in hurried steps. Announcements echoed overhead. Machines beeped steadily. After what felt like hours, a doctor approached. She was kind-faced but serious. "Are you Asha?" she asked. Asha nodded. "Your mother is stable for now," the doctor said. She collapsed due to a pause, a breath, severe exhaustion, anemia, and malnutrition. Asha blinked, confused. "Mal what?" "She hasn't been eating enough," the doctor explained gently. "Her body is extremely weak." Asha's throat tightened. "She always makes sure I eat." The doctor placed a hand on her shoulder. "And she's been giving her food to you." Asha's chest caved inward. "What will happen to her?" she whispered. We'll keep her here for a few days, the doctor said. But after that, she'll need rest. And care.
Care.
The word struck Asha harder than the rest. She was only 11, but she already knew that whatever came next, it would be hers to carry. The waiting room of fear. Asha slept in the waiting room that night, curled up in one of the stiff chairs. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, and every time a nurse walked by, she flinched awake. She finally slipped into a shallow sleep around dawn. Her dreams were fragmented, her mother calling her name, trains shaking the walls, teachers scolding her, doors closing one after another. When she woke, a blanket had been draped over her. She didn't know who placed it, but she whispered, "Thank you," into the empty air. She visited her mother's room in the morning. Mina smiled faintly when Asha entered. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. Asha rushed to her side.
No.
"Don't say that. Please." "I didn't want you to worry," Mina continued weakly. I thought I could handle it." Asha held her mother's hand with both of hers. "You don't have to handle everything alone." Mina's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want you to see me like this. But I see you," Asha said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere." Her mother closed her eyes, letting the tears fall. For the first time, Asha felt something shift inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was responsibility. A heavy, overwhelming sense of responsibility that pushed childhood aside and replaced it with something older. Too old for 11. Too heavy for small shoulders. But it settled there anyway. The return home. 2 days later, Mina was released from the hospital with strict instructions.
Rest. Eat.
Avoid stress. No heavy work. The doctor insisted. The nurse repeated. Asha promised. But reality didn't listen. When they walked back into the apartment, the truth hit them like winter wind. Bills stacked on the table. Medication sitting beside them. A near-empty fridge humming weakly.
And silence.
Asha looked at her mother, who stood in the doorway, hand pressed to her chest. For the first time, Asha understood something brutal. No one was coming to save them. It was her now. Her responsibility. Her fight. And she would fight. For her mother. For herself. For a life that didn't hurt so much. The new chapter of hard. Asha woke the next morning before the sun. She made tea for her mother. Cleaned the kitchen. Checked the neighbor's baby monitor for her mother's friend, who had begged Asha for help. Then she walked to school alone, her backpack heavier than ever, not because of books, but because of what she carried inside. At school, Mrs. Carter handed out worksheets without looking at Asha. Zoya ignored her completely. The counselor saw her in the hallway and asked, "Are things better at home?" Asha simply said, "Yes," because she didn't have the energy to explain what exhaustion felt like at 11. But she sat in her window seat, listening to the train rumble past behind the school, and she whispered to herself, "I can do hard things." Winter was not yet gone. The gray skies lingered, and the cold had softened only slightly, like a stubborn bruise that refused to fade. Asha woke early again, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the old heater. Her mother lay in bed, still pale, still fragile, but breathing steadily. Asha made tea, scrambled eggs, and gently coaxed her mother to eat, as if every sip and bite were a victory against the hunger and weakness that had nearly claimed her. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. 11 years old, yet she moved with the careful precision of someone twice her age. Every action mattered. Every choice could tip the fragile balance of their lives. She reminded herself silently over and over, "I can do this. I have to." The school struggle. At school, nothing had changed, but everything felt different. The halls still echoed with laughter and chatter, but the noise now felt distant, almost foreign. Asha's friends noticed she seemed quieter, more serious. Some asked questions, others pretended not to see the shift. Zoya, as always, walked past with her usual smirk. But Asha didn't flinch. Not anymore. She simply kept walking, eyes forward, backpack tight against her small frame. In class, Mrs. Carter handed out worksheets, the same as always, But Asha's mind was elsewhere. She solved problems mechanically, her hand moving across paper, but part of her stayed at home, thinking about her mother's rest, the empty fridge, the bills stacked on the kitchen table. When the counselor peeked in, she asked gently, "Are things better at home?" Asha's throat tightened. The truth was a heavy, jagged stone. She shook her head slightly and murmured, "Yes," even though she knew it wasn't. Not yet. Not really. But it was easier than explaining what exhaustion, fear, and responsibility felt like when you were only 11. The homeward routine. The walk home was long, but Asha had memorized every shortcut, every cracked sidewalk tile, every faded street sign. She carried groceries when she could afford them, held the keys to the apartment in her pocket like a talisman, and prepared herself for whatever awaited inside. Back home, she cleaned, cooked, and organized, all while keeping one ear tuned for her mother's soft coughs, one eye on the fragile balance of the apartment. Some nights, she'd sit in the small window, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky, and whisper to herself, "I can do hard things." This mantra became a shield, a quiet chant that held her upright when her small body and mind threatened to give way under the weight of responsibility. The weight of adult worries. One afternoon, as Asha sorted through old bills, she realized that life was not just difficult, it was unfair. Some families had warmth, food, stability. Others had chaos, hunger, and fear. She could feel the gap in her chest, a hollow ache of knowing her mother had sacrificed everything for her. Mina tried to reassure her. "We'll manage, Asha. We always do." But Asha already knew. It wasn't enough to survive. They needed more than scraps and makeshift plans. They needed a future, something stronger than the uncertainty that clung to every corner of their tiny apartment. She set herself a quiet goal. She would help. She didn't know how yet, but she would learn. She would fight for their little life, every day, one step at a time. The school project. A week later, Mrs. Carter announced a group project. Asha's heart sank. She knew group work meant compromise, negotiation, and, most terrifying, being noticed. But when her group partner, Lena, tried to brush her off, Asha surprised herself by standing firm. "I'll do my part," she said quietly, but with an edge that stopped Lena mid-sentence. And she did. She stayed late after school, scribbling notes, organizing slides, and rehearsing presentations in the empty classroom until her fingers cramped. When the project was finally presented, it was flawless. Lena gave her a grudging nod. Asha smiled faintly, not for praise, but for the quiet satisfaction of proving to herself that she could handle pressure, responsibility, and expectations, even while carrying so much more at home. The small victories. Life didn't get easier overnight. There were nights when the heater broke, when the bills piled higher, when her mother coughed too hard or too long. There were days when Asha returned home to an empty fridge and no money for groceries. But there were also small victories. A warm meal cooked from leftovers. A note from a teacher saying she was doing well. The first smile from her mother that didn't come with an apology or a cough. The quiet confidence that began to bloom inside her chest, a new kind of warmth, one she had earned herself. Each of these moments became fuel. Each small victory a stone in the foundation of the resilience she was building. The neighborhood watch. Asha noticed how the world outside her apartment seemed both cruel and kind at the same time. Some neighbors avoided her. Others offered help quietly. A plate of food left outside the door. A note slipped under the mat. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, noticed the way Asha rushed to school and back each day. She began leaving small items, groceries, soap, medicine, never asking for thanks. "Some of us have to watch out for each other," Mrs. Patel said one day, patting Asha's shoulder. "Even when the world feels cold, there's warmth to be found." Asha clutched the small bag of food like a treasure. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that she wasn't completely alone, that the world wasn't entirely harsh. The night of tears. One evening, after dinner, Asha finally allowed herself to cry. She sat on the edge of her mother's bed, gripping her knees, and let the tears fall freely. She wept for fear, for exhaustion, for the unfairness of the world. She wept for her mother, who had given everything and more. She wept for herself, for the child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. Mina came and sat beside her, her own frail hand covering Asha's. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay to cry." "I'm tired, Mom," Asha admitted between sobs. "I know," her mother said softly, "but we'll get through this. Together." And in that quiet, shared moment, Asha felt a fragile kind of hope. It wasn't loud, it wasn't triumphant, but it was there, a tiny flame in the winter-dark apartment. The lesson of strength. The days rolled forward, each one a blend of struggle and learning. Asha learned how to budget the small amount of money they had, how to prepare meals that stretched, how to comfort a mother who refused to let herself be weak in front of her daughter. She learned that strength was not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and persistent. And every night, as she lay in her bed, exhausted but determined, she whispered the words she had learned to live by. "I can do hard things." Not because she had to, not because there was a choice, but because she believed it. Because she had no one else to rely on but herself, and she had already survived the kind of fear that could break anyone her age. And in the silence of the winter apartment, Asha realized that she was not just surviving, she was learning to be strong.